A super easy rut to fall into is the thought, if I'm not actively saying no to God, then I'll be all right. Then I'm basically saying yes. And sometimes I think we can operate in this way where my default position is, well, I'm going to end up with God in the end. As long as I don't explicitly reject him or something, then I can't really mess it up. But like a river, the spiritual life is like, I think in that mindset that we just talked about, it's like we're going with the current. But for anybody that's tried to have a prayer life extendedly or to be faithful, it's kind of like rowing upriver. It's hard. It takes a fight. And you actually need to have an active response. And in the gospel today, I think what we hear is kind of Jesus coming back to this point. How many times in that gospel did he use the phrase invited, invitation? He's making an invitation. So he's clearly trying to get something about heaven across to us. We as people, as God's people, are extended an invite. Our entire life is a response to that invitation. God does the inviting, we do the responding, and it's our choice. We can say yes, or we can say no. And sometimes I feel as if, like, in my default, it's like, well, if I don't respond, then it's probably going to end up being yes. Up, up, up. Be careful with that. It's not a passive thing. God is seeking us out, and we need to choose. So, looking into the real life, when we have examples of when we are invited to things, you can pick the party of your choice. If it's Super Bowl party, birthday party, polka party, whatever party you want to go to. But when you get the invitation, the other person starts. It's their initiative. And you receive it. And then if parties in Forest Lake are like parties in St. Michael, you RSVP yes or you RSVP no. Meaning there's not really like this default. Like, well, if I just don't respond, I can just show up. It's like, well, no, they're going to be very surprised if you don't RSVP. There needs to be this active response to the invitation. Or another example, I think in marriage, I've never been married, but I lived with my parents for 18 years who were married. And what it at least seemed like from the outside was that they both mutually gave this invitation to one another. They both invited each other into their lives. And if you can imagine in that marriage, if one of them said, well, I'm not going to break any major rules. I'm not going to actively turn away from my spouse, but I'm not really going to, say yes or invest in it. You could see where that would be problematic. You could see that would not be met well. In order to respond to an invitation, we need to take an active step. It needs to be an active yes. We cannot do this passively. And it all comes down to this. Love is a choice. I think the culture gets this really, really wrong. Everybody's looking for love. Everybody. The people on Instagram, the people that want attention, the people, whatever. They're all looking for love, and they're looking for this love, but they're not even sure what it is they're looking for. But we know that love is not a feeling. If it was, that would not be the greatest act of love to ever have happened, because that doesn't look like it feels super great. Love is a choice. You can feel loved, but at the end of the day, it's a choice, and it's not a default position. And so let's look at this. This kind of begs us to ask the question. So God has this invite for us. So what does the invitation to us say? And how do I RSVP? How do I RSVP for this party, Deacon Ryan? I want to go. It sounds good. Well, the invite itself says, I love you. And what do you say when your mom as a kid said to you, Ryan, I love you? What do you say back? Yeah, I love you too. It's as simple as that. God is saying to us with his whole heart, with his whole being, with his whole self, I love you. He said that from the beginning of time, and he continues to say that every moment of our life. None of us could exist without God constantly loving us into existence. We are dependent on that love. That's what we're looking for. That's the invite. I love you. And what he wants us to say back is, I love you. And that's not a one and done. I think there are some other Protestant religions that would say, as soon as you RSVP to the party, you're good. As soon as you say, yeah, I love you too, you're good. Whereas as Catholics, we say, our response to that invitation to say, I love you, is something we live throughout our entire life. Yes, you need to RSVP to the party. That initial moment when we come to God is very important. But there's something to be said about living your life as a response. What do I mean? In my thoughts, I'm saying, I love you too. In my actions, I'm saying, I love you too. In the choices that I make, in the people I hang out with, in the words that I say, in the prayers that I take time to say and to be with God. I am saying with my life, I love you too. There are three, let's break this down just a little bit, and I want to leave you with something to kind of examine. I love you. That's the response that Jesus is looking for us. But I think sometimes we can stop too soon. And if we're honest with ourselves, I think there's many places in each of our lives where we respond poorly. We don't say, I love you, we stop at I. Right? That's our default. You want to talk about a default position? Our default is just to say I, to omit the love you part. And that's like selfishness, right? Jesus at the end of time, he says, I love you. And you say I. That's selfishness. I don't know if you've met someone that's truly selfish, like actually truly at their very core, very selfish, but typically selfish people are quite miserable. They feel lonely, selfish. It's just me. They feel responsible for their own happiness. I'm the center of my life, and if it doesn't work out, and what I'm doing doesn't work out, I'm quite unhappy. And when we respond, I mean, that to me, you ask what heaven's like, what purgatory's like, what hell is like, this is kind of hell on earth. If you've ever met someone that's truly selfish, that responds, I, and does not get to love you, there is a selfishness there. The reason that heaven is heavenly is because of who is there. And when we are selfish, when we just say I, when life is about me, when I'm at the center of my own solar system, I'm miserable. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, there's still areas in my life where I say I. And those are the areas where I'm the most unhappy, honestly. Now there's the next way that we can finish. There's I. That's like hell. And then there's I love. So we're not quite there to I love you, but we said I love. So we're outside of ourselves. It's not completely self-focused, but we're responding and we're looking for the love that we desire in the wrong places. You see the difference there? So it's not me, 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 me. This is I'm looking for love, but I'm looking in the wrong places. And so you can pick your genre. I'm sure we all have our favorite. Is it power? Is it money? Is it sports? Is it whatever? Is it success? In each of these things that we love, people's opinions, that's a good one. Not a good one, but you know what I mean. These things aren't necessarily bad. Like having a good opinion of another, having another person have a good opinion of you, or having your sports team win, or these different things, those aren't inherently bad. The problem is when the love that I'm seeking and the response that I'm giving is that. It's not God. That's the problem. Because we'll get to the end of time and we won't stop at I, but we'll say, I love that. I love when other people like me. I like when my sports teams win. And it's like, that sounds a lot like you're on the right track. You're looking for love, but you're not quite there. That's why we have purgatory. Your love is being purified. Your love is being purified so that you can be with the one who makes heaven heavenly. And lastly, the response to the invitation. God says, I love you. And the response that all of us in our life should be going for is, Lord, I love you too. I love you, Lord. That's the correct answer. And that's not a passive thing. That's not our default. That's not Ryan's default. I'll be first to tell you that. It's a choice. Love is a choice. But when we live there, when we live in love, knowing ourselves to be loved, have you ever gone into a situation and you've actually been confident? Gosh, I am so loved. Not in this confident, super cocky kind of way, but I know myself to be loved. When someone knows themselves to be loved, when they live loved, those are the most effective, most confident, most happy, at peace people you will ever encounter. I love you. When we receive the invitation and we respond in love, that is true happiness. That's heaven on earth. I is hell. I love is an image for purgatory, and I love you is an image for heaven. So love is a choice, my brothers and sisters, and today I just invite you to reflect, not in shame, because we're all works in progress, not be hard on yourself, but just ask yourself in honesty, where am I living I? Where am I responding to God's invitation I? Where am I responding I love? It's not the right place, but I'm trying. And work with the Lord there. And don't forget to actually be grateful. Where am I responding in my life? I love you, Lord. And be grateful for the joy and the happiness that comes. Because love, at the end, is the only thing that remains.